Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Comics Lair. I'm your host, Nancy Northcott. The Comics Lair is sponsored by Heroes Aren't Hard to Find and Heroes Convention. This panel will discuss the varied faces of Moon Knight with a focus on the Disney Plus miniseries. And this is a spoiler alert. If you have not watched the entire miniseries and you plan to do so, you might want to wait and come back and watch this panel after you have done that, because we are going to talk about everything up to and including the Easter egg in the credits. So consider yourselves warned. And with that, I'd like to ask our panel to introduce themselves, tell us a little bit about themselves, and a little bit about their interest in Moon Knight. Bishop, you want to start?
Sure. I'm Bishop O'Connell. I'm the author of the American Fairy Tale series and soon to be the Two Gun Witch. I've read a little bit of Moon Knight in the comic books. I remember picking it up because I thought it was cool because I was into mythology as a kid. So, you know, Greek mythology and Egyptian mythology and all that. And I thought it, and I just remember thinking, wow, this is not at all what I thought this was going to be. Like I said before we got started, as weird as the television show is, the comic book is even weirder. But I didn't get heavily into it. I did read some, and I more saw Moon Knight when he showed up in other people's comics or in larger Marvel ones like Civil War and things like that. But that said, I was very interested to see what Disney was going to do with the television series. So I was eagerly awaiting that. And I'm also a huge fan of Oscar Isaac rather. He's a phenomenal actor. So I was really eager to see that.
Okay. Dan, you want to jump in?
My name is Dan Jolley. I've been writing professionally for a really long time and write in a bunch of different media. Started out writing comic books, and from there got into novels of various kinds and kids' books, and done a little bit of screenplay stuff, and I work in video games. But the first third of my career was strictly comic books. And you would think that I would have read Moon Knight, having worked for DC and Marvel and the rest of the major publishers in the country. But no, I skirted around Moon Knight somehow. So I knew about the character. I knew some guys that had worked on the character, but my first real, actual exposure was the Disney Plus TV series. So I can be the ignoramus in the room. I'm fine with that.
Samantha?
Hi, I'm Samantha Bryant. I'm best known for the menopausal superhero series, and I also write quite a bit of horror these days. And so far as Moon Knight, I'm like Dan. I'm a noob to the series. I know a little bit about it because my husband was a fan when he was younger, and you get some things through some kind of marriage osmosis. But I think what drew me to it is I've always been attracted to kind of pulp Egypt, in things like Raiders of the Lost Ark and Tomb Raider and The Mummy and all of that kind of stuff. And this seemed to hit a lot of those same notes. So I thought I would really like it. And it turned out to be weirder than I expected. And I liked it more than I expected.
Jim?
I am Jim Nettles. I am science fiction, fantasy, bit of horror, a bit of this, that, and the other author, as well as a nonfiction author as well. I actually was not real deep into Moon Knight before the series. I had read some of them off and on. I've got some friends that are huge into Moon Knight that were extraordinarily excited. The main reason I read it, and this has been a long time ago, was I did a series talking about the use of various forms of psychological impairment, sort of mental disorders, things like that, in characters in the comics. And I actually used him for PTSD and a number of other things. But because I'm also, I love mythology and history, and while I have not worked in Egypt, I actually have spent part of my misspent youth as an anthropologist, or an anthropology, and done a few things. So I have some of that misspent youth. And the series I thought was really interesting, really complex. There were parts to it that were a lot of fun.
And even though I'm the moderator, I too have never read an issue of Moon Knight. So if there is an ignoramus corner, I'm in it too. My only experience with the character is seeing the comic book on the stands and watching the Disney Plus series. So Bishop and Jim are the ones with more familiarity, and Samantha has some. What did you think about the way the series compares to the comic book other than weirder? Any impressions?
I know for me, I was glad that they took itself more seriously in the show. I mean, the show had humorous moments in it, you know, and there were things that were definitely played for laughs. But a lot of the comic series, as I remember reading, even as a kid, picking up, a lot of it felt very tongue-in-cheek, like it was almost like a parody of itself. Like it was making fun of itself. And I'm glad that the television show didn't take that angle, because I think that there was a lot of heaviness and a lot of seriousness in the show that I think was handled very well. That I think if they would have taken that tongue-in-cheek approach, it really would have soured that. It would have felt like petty, or just kind of window dressing. So I'm glad that it took itself more seriously than the comic book did.
Yeah, and to kind of build on that, I think part of it there is that, in the comics, this is already somebody who knows sort of who they are, all the thems that are in there. But I think being the origin story and being where it started and being a Disney show, but I mean, I think it had to take that more serious note of, because if it took more of the Deadpool, Wade Wilson, even that origin story of, yes, this is the snark, this is the way I go, that would not have fit the series or the character. But I think the fact that it was darker also shows kind of that exploration of, oh yeah, there's a problem here, let me start working it out. And I think the other thing is that I think it did show well, that still contrasts, is still kind of that surrealist nature of, is it real, is it not? With the comics, you're making that assumption. And even with the Disney Plus show, you're making that assumption, even where it kind of blatantly comes and says, well, is it real, is it not? But I think that was one of the things it did really well.
It's my understanding that they did a bit of work to just trying to bring it into this century and take some of the cringier racial stereotypes out, and let the woman be a whole character instead of just a costume and that kind of stuff. So like I said, I didn't really read the other stuff. It's only what I've heard about it, but I have heard that, and I am glad to hear that.
That was kind of the norm for the comics of that time period anyway.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it definitely did lean heavily into the pulp side of it, that it was the pretty girl in the arm sidekick type of thing. I really liked what they did with her character in the TV show.
This Layla's nobody's sidekick.
Yeah, I think she should get her own series now.
Oh, she's way more competent than any of the versions of our main character.
Oh.
Well, based on my extensive education through Comics Wiki this afternoon, it looks like they changed Mark Spector. Not so much Mark Spector, but Stephen Grant. Wikipedia described him as being more like a billionaire jet setter, sort of like Bruce Wayne or like Steve Dayton in the Doom Patrol. And Layla was a character named Marlene, who was his fiance.
Yeah.
So it was Stephen who had the fiance instead of Mark?
Yeah.
No, she was Mark's fiance, but Stephen was a billionaire.
Right. Yeah. Stephen was the playboy, which is why the Mr. Knight was the one with the suit for the millionaire, that it was, flashier and yeah.
And I actually think that was one of the places that was not entirely congruous, because, one of the things that you find, because I mean, much like a Batman or something else like that, the money gives you options. So, I think by changing that and flipping it entirely on its head of, you're working in a gift shop, you're not sitting on a ton of money, then you kind of have to rely on wits and things like that. And I think that played better for the TV show. Mm-hmm. But I think in terms of reality, that was much more wasn't congruous with seeing the character in the suit and that level of dapper and the confidence that came with that, when, that was not that persona.
I
Right,
did
well-
very much enjoy it though when he first put on the suit and his suit was that suit.
Yeah.
It was just so charming that, like, you know, you're like, put on a suit, and he went, yes, okay, apparently I have a date.
Psycho Colonel Sanders, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the billionaire persona, that like I know in the early stages of the character, there were a lot of comparisons between him and Batman.
Mhm.
Like, oh, this is just another Batman, and the billionaire part, you know, it's a direct parallel. For those who have read the comics, like how heavily did they lean into the billionaire playboy fighting crime thing?
I seem to remember them leaning pretty heavily into it. I remember at the time, like immediately making a connection. I mean, never mind the fact that, you know, one suit is black and one is white, but otherwise they're kind of similar with the capes and everything. They both throw basically batarang things. You know, it's you know, the martial arts and the fighting style and all that. I seem to remember them leaning pretty heavily into it.
Well, and it's a story that's got big pulp roots. I mean, you
Right.
can definitely see that. And the you know, secret millionaire is sure handy when you're trying to have pulp adventures and you need a submarine all of a sudden or something. You know, helps to just not have to worry about where your character got the money.
Right. Yeah. If there's no day job, it's easier to go on adventures to other countries and locations.
Well,
Yeah,
what
when you're
did you
not
all
having to
think of
stock the
this?
shelves.
Right.
What did you say, Jim? I'm sorry.
I said when you're not having to stock the shelves of, you know, magnets and shot glasses.
They're good.
And hippos.
So what did you all think of the Stephen character anyway? Dan, you want to start us off?
Well, watching the show, it really drove it home to me how horrifying it could be genuinely not to know what is real and what is not. You know, somebody who is that unmoored from reality. I mean, thinking about that too long, it kind of gives me the creeps. Just trying to imagine, you know, if you still have some rationality, you can tell yourself, no, the giant raven skull-headed guy isn't real. Of course he's not real. The things like that aren't real. But then, you know, faced with more circumstances which then lend a lot of credence to stuff like that being real, I don't know how you could function. It was just, to go back to the same word, it's horrifying. And then Stephen Grant, I think, did a pretty good job of being unsettled and unhinged about it.
Anybody
I'm a
else?
sucker for a schlub myself, and the, you know,
Yeah.
I always like that the poor hapless person who gets sucked into the adventure, and Stephen has a lot of that vibe as portrayed here. He feels like, you know, he's my way in because, you know, I'm not a secret millionaire. Sorry guys, I won't be inviting you to my island anytime soon.
That's it. I'm out.
So
Fine.
you know, having that working class guy there who's getting into the story and pulled into the adventure is a good in, I think, for some readers or viewers.
Right. Well, and it's also good, right, for that connection, because it's like, how many like us regular people, when we encountered this, we would react exactly the same way, right? I mean, if this hyena thing started chasing us, you know, we'd be, you know, soiling our pants. Is the reason we'd be running to the bathroom is because we'd have to clean them afterwards. You know, I mean, it's that whole sense of, you know, the whole world unhinged, and the only thing you can do is just scream and run. I mean, it's.
I'm not running. I'm too old, too slow. Come on, let me whack you with the
Okay, well, yeah. Okay, now.
now.
But yeah, I think the actor did a beautiful job with being able to play all of these different people. I actually wasn't familiar with this actor before this series, but I'm definitely going to be seeking out more of his work now because he really impressed me. And he had me on Stephen's side really quickly without me being able to state why exactly. There was just something so charming, and he brought out my desire to protect him. Like, I was like, oh gosh, maybe we should get this guy to a good doctor, and the very, the early reveal of how he sleeps. You're like, what in the world is wrong with this poor boy?
Yeah. Yeah, the vulnerability really got played well, I think. And it's like, to build on what Samantha was saying, it wasn't just a simple characteristics of how he embodied the different personalities. I mean, his entire demeanor changed. He walked differently, he stood differently, he carried himself differently. I mean, I remember thinking about it afterwards, and it's like, it must have been exhausting to have to be so conscious of every aspect of yourself to make sure you're portraying the right person the right way. I mean,
Yeah, and the other thing with Stephen was he gave a good soul to the character, so you got that good side first. You got that vision of, here is the vulnerable person. This is, and if you think about it in terms of kind of everybody, you've got that vulnerable side, you've got the the defensive side, whatever else. But it really played well to see that true vulnerable person first, who everybody's trotting on before you're going to put them into existential dread and existential risk.
Yeah, and
I actually didn't like Mark when we met him. He was just such a bully and a jerk, especially since I was really firmly in Stephen's point of view and really cheering for him. Once Mark came in, it took several episodes before I started to think I didn't want to just kill him off and get on with the rest of the story.
Well, I mainly know Oscar Isaac from the Star Wars trilogy. And no, I agree with everything you all have said about his performance, but neither of those performances is Poe Dameron, his character in Star Wars. It's also not the, I don't even remember the name of the character. This movie has kind of mercifully gone by, but it was the X-Men movie where he
Apocalypse.
Apocalypse, yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Dan. So yeah, but for me, by the time Stephen came in and we actually got Moon Knight, I had kind of reached my limit with the alterations of reality. I kind of wanted to move on from that into something else. And I sort of think they structured the episode that way so they could finish the first episode with the big reveal of Moon Knight and kind of lean into the conflict between these two split personalities. And I thought it was really interesting, and I'd like to know what you all think about the whole concept of, on the boat at the end, the hearts weighing two of them at once instead of one against the feather, and they're not in balance, and therefore dire things happen until they start to accept each other. And it's coming back to what Samantha was saying about Mark really seems like a bully. They didn't like each other. They didn't want each other. It's like, I'm going to keep the body. So I'd be interested to know what you all thought about how that was handled.
Well, it's not really them accepting each other. It's Mark accepting what Mark created.
Yeah.
So I thought it did make a lot of sense that once the Stephen persona had been discarded, for lack of a better term, that then he could achieve some balance. Even though, I don't know, you could look at it in a couple of different ways. On the boat, it was Stephen who stepped forward and attacked the antagonist and flipped over the side. Not really something that Mark intended to happen, but it was still Mark's brain handling what it needed to handle.
Well, that's like Stephen said, "You've got this," and he went, "Wait, if you've got this and I'm you, I've got this."
Yeah.
And that was a really nice little bit, I thought.
Well, I thought it was an interesting play too, because the Stephen personality came as a defense mechanism to deal with all the trauma. So the protector personality was the more timid one, the less violent, the less physical one, the more vulnerable one. And the one he was protecting was the badass of the two. So I thought that was an interesting dichotomy there. the way they flipped it around, what you would think it would be. That you would think that the way it developed, that Stephen would be, the strong, powerful one who's ready to step in when, Mark needs to be protected from something. Whereas it was more of Mark wasn't being protected. Mark went and hid. And Stephen just got lost in a delusion in his own little fantasy world. So it took away from what, I'm obviously not a psychologist, so I don't understand dissociative disorder, but from, pop culture, what they've done with it, that's the complete opposite of what I would have expected from everything I've seen. And it's there's another movie that's, if you want to see just how weird Oscar Isaac can get, I think it's Deus Ex.
Oh, Ex Machina.
Yeah.
Ex Machina, yeah.
Yeah, that is that'll make Moon Knight seem like a very clear, straightforward storyline. But he's magnificent in that too, and it's just you don't see the connections.
I thought that was a great scene. The idea, the unification, the recognition that both halves are necessary, except there's more than two parts in there. And that was my big problem, is you already knew, even by that point, no, there's more than two parts in there, which really raises a question of, well, what role does that third part serve? And does it have a soul, for lack of a better term? And that was one of those things that I think it opened a bigger question than it actually answered.
Mm-hmm.
Well, speaking of additional personas in there, we got to look at that at the very, very end of the series. What did you think about that when it happened?
I'm glad they let us see him.
Yeah.
Because there'd been hints, right?
Mm-hmm.
There was the moment when there were a bunch of dead bodies around, and both Mark and Stephen said it wasn't me. And I turned to my husband and I said, so there must be a third one.
Right.
And I was right.
Yeah.
And then that bit with the shaking sarcophagus, when they were in the weird afterworld insane asylum thing, that that was, I would think, would be the third them trying to get out. And I would have been disappointed if we ended without at least giving some good hint about who exactly this third one is. So I thought it was a really good place to end.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, and I'll be curious to see, because obviously it's setting up what's going to happen in the future. And it's an interesting enough character and an interesting enough place to see, now we've watched the semi-integration of two personalities, learning to at least live with each other and share. Now knowing that they've actually got another monster in the house that really doesn't care, because both of them have sort of learned that degree of strength, and the other has gotten sort of that degree of heart. And now they've got that combination and integration. And now you've got, now we're just going to clean up this problem that neither one of y'all was willing to do.
Right. Yeah, and it really does take away. I think a lot of that really repaints the way Khonshu is presented, right? Because throughout it all, Khonshu is supposed to be played up as, I don't know if it was a good guy is really the right way to put it, but the one that was on the moral good side, that Khonshu was the one that waited until people did something bad to punish them. So, you're siding with Khonshu, and you may not always agree with the tactics and the way things carried out, but at least this is identifiable. And then you get to the Easter egg at the end, and you're just like, oh yeah, no, Khonshu is not a good guy either. It's another shade of suck.
Well, if there's anything mythology shows us, is that the gods are not to be trusted.
Right.
But I thought it was a big moment for Stephen and Mark at the very end when Khonshu said, finish it. He wanted him to kill Harrow. And Layla said, you have a choice. And Stephen said, you know what? You want him dead, you do it. And so that made what happened later, I thought, have extra resonance, because Khonshu didn't do it. Set it up, but he didn't do it. And go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, I was going to move on to another question. So go ahead.
Well, and I think that really, again, raises that idea of, when you're playing with the deities and the gods, they have a very different perspective. But I think the one thing that they did really well throughout was that thing that says, no, we are gods, and you're our avatars, but you're disposable until until we find a better and upgrade. And versus a lot of the time you see that perception of the gods initially presenting themselves as, oh, well, we're here for your good, your benefit, da da da. Nowhere in any of this do they present any of the deities as being anything other than, yeah, we've got avatars because you're useful at this moment.
Although
And
I would say Taweret, I can't remember how you pronounce her
yeah,
name. She comes off pretty good. I mean, she is like, it's actually endearing how genuinely excited she is to get an avatar.
right.
Mhm.
And she even agrees to make it a temporary thing, and she comes across as a god that's actually kind of straightforward and honest. But yeah, I agree with all the others.
This may be because I'm a little suspicious, but that aspect of knowledge of, okay, great, I get to play. I almost got the sense of, I get to play with a toy for a while. I haven't gotten a toy in a while. I get to play with a toy. Ooh, I get to have an out. Oh, you're only temporary. All right, great. I still get to go play with the toys.
Yeah,
even though
she
it was
gets to play dress up with the new doll.
Mhm.
She was very excited about the costume.
Yeah.
It made a good contrast though,
Yeah.
Oh,
as
yeah.
far as like not feeling so directly manipulative and unconcerned about the damage to the avatars that all the other gods seemed to be projecting. So it was good to have a little bit of contrast in there, so
Mhm.
you didn't just think the best thing they could do was somehow find a way to get away from all of them.
Right.
Well,
Yeah,
I
and
will say
and
that's
she
an
actually.
awesome costume.
I'm
That's
sorry.
an awesome costume.
Yeah.
It
Oh, yeah.
reminded me a little bit of the Isis from the TV show, but only a little
Mhm.
bit. It's a lot cooler. So I just wanted to throw that in while I thought about it. What were you going to say, Bishop?
Oh no, I was going to say she did actually seem to genuinely like Layla too, whereas the other gods kind of made their avatars seem like, you're a tool. I'm just using you, and Poirot was like genuinely excited to be talking with Layla and interacting with her. I mean, I agree with you. I think there's some suspicion there, but I think that the way they presented the character too, and of course, Khonshu shifted from what we knew about him all the way to the Easter egg, but the character was presented as a helpful god. She was filling in from where, I think it's Horus should have been the one weighing the hearts and working the boats. So yeah, it's I mean, she was probably one of my favorite characters, if not my favorite.
Oh, ton of fun.
Yeah.
Wasn't it fun when she spoke? Because the
Oh, yeah.
contrast between that sweet voice and the giant hippo.
Well, the actor, she just loved that. She had so much fun with that role.
Yeah, you could hear it.
Yeah. Yeah, she was just as excited to be there as everybody else. It's like, I'm just happy to be here.
And how's that for your resume? What did you play? Oh,
Right.
a hippo.
Yeah, and I mean, into the costume, I'm going to be interested to see what they do with Layla, because for the people who aren't familiar with the comic books, her character is based off of the Scarlet Scarab, I think is what she was called in the comics, which I'm not quite sure. I mean, her father calls her Scarab, but I'm not quite sure how that costume comes about from the goddess of fertility and childbirth, and and it is a hippo, so now you've got wings.
It was probably just a late night brainstorming session, like name some
Yeah.
Egyptian stuff.
Yeah.
Well, there's the hippos in the river, and they got the birds that sit on them.
You've got the
she's like the
ibises.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's what we're trying to figure out what bird Khonshu was based on.
Ibis.
On actual mythology, he's a hawk. He's actually the same as Horus. And I think I read somewhere they said they changed him to a corvid.
It looked like a raven skull.
Yeah, they changed it to make it distinct, so it wouldn't confuse people they wouldn't confuse him with Horus with the way he looked.
Definitely gave him a bit of a plague doctor look, so he seemed ominous from the very outset, just from the way he looked.
Yeah.
We know a lot of us get our Egyptian mythology from Stargate SG-1. So I would be curious to know what those of you who are more versed in Egyptian mythology than many of us are thought about the use of mythology, since we're kind of already talking about that anyway. Jim, you want to start us?
It was liberally used. Let's put it this way. I believe that Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom was more historically accurate. However, I think that it was one of those things that I think it's going to create a lot of interest, and there are aspects that they pulled on that, they were, while they may have liberally used the history of some of them, I think that they were a little bit true, at least in the spirit of some of the characters they brought in, or some of the different deities they used and pulled from. But I think also what we saw was, again, because we saw so much of it through, like the weighing of the hearts, and now the way they depicted the sunboat, Ra's sunboat, and I thought was really a lot of fun, and the Sea of the Dead and the sands and all that, actually I thought was done very well. And that aspect of seeing Khonshu and seeing these tall deities when you walk, or when you're in the temple and you're seeing all of them around, I thought that was done extremely well. Again, I don't think it would have been, that's nowhere near what reality would have been walking into the, into the Great Pyramid, but I think that they at least captured the essence in a lot of cases, of the mythology. I would not say that they captured the historical story as well, but neither does Moon Knight. I mean, it's like anything else. We're going to grab onto this and it sounds like a good idea, and we're going to leverage this. Ooh, now we're just going to go, we're going to go play with this and have fun. And I think that's the thing to keep in mind.
Yeah, we know that chamber isn't the Great Pyramids because we all know the Great Pyramids are actually landing pads for alien spacecraft.
That's right.
Target SUV.
And like there's basically like two different ways to approach stories that use mythology. And like there's, okay, yes, you can be accurate. You can go into the legends, the writings of Egyptians or the Norse people or whoever, and be accurate, depict all of the gods and goddesses and creatures and whatever you want to as they were. Or, and I think this might be kind of what Moon Knight was leaning into, is the same approach that Marvel took with Thor, which is to say that the Asgardians are not gods the way we understand gods. They're aliens, and they revealed their presence to the Norse people long ago, and that's what the Norse people were trying to talk about. That's why you can have Idris Elba as Heimdall. That dude is not Norwegian, but it's okay if he's an alien. And if I know that in the comics, because I did some wiki reading too, that in the comics these creatures like Khonshu, which if he was going to be accurate, I think it is supposed to be Khonsu. They're entities that live in this other void, this other extra dimensional realm that can create connections to people that become their avatars. But they're not what we would think of as deities. They're entities that live somewhere else and are very powerful. So, if you're going to take that approach, then all of the liberal interpretations, I think, are a little bit more acceptable, a little bit more palatable.
And again, what I was going to say is I didn't have any problem at all with the representations. I think it's just one of those things of know what you're getting, but then go study, because like you say with Khonshu, or when you look at some of the representations they used, go study the history, because you're going to find a lot of fun and interesting stuff there, where I think they pulled the essence of some of them. Look at Thor and Loki. Because I think people are at least more familiar with that mythology and the brotherly love, but look at the fact of the trickster nature of Loki. Look at how fundamentally Thor is, generally drinks a lot and relatively good human being, but also likes to go smash. He and Hulk should have been better buddies than they were.
Yeah, it's pop culture mythology, right? You take the parts of it that are interesting, and you leave the drier points behind. And I think part of with Moon Knight, I think having the advantage of having the director, and I don't know if the writers were also Middle Eastern, but having people who are representative of sort of the sandbox, no pun intended, that you're playing in. I think that helps it too, because you want to take it and you want to have fun with it, but you also don't want to just be a jackass about it, right?
Right. It's definitely better than older pulp shows that
Right.
just take the barest little window dressing of what a culture is and put it on a white guy and go.
Right.
They made much more effort to represent something closer to truth, and I think audiences will appreciate that, and it definitely sparked some interest for me. I'll go, I already had an Egypt phase at least twice in my life. What's wrong with the third one in my 50s?
Right. Yeah, and it wasn't exoticized, right? I mean, it wasn't, made out to be, the secret spooky other from, the deepest, darkest areas of Africa. It didn't take all that. It treated it almost like any other culture. And yeah.
I liked the moment when the little girl said to Layla in the middle of the big fight at the end,
Yes.
which I give big credit to for not being like 45 minutes of CGI explosions.
Right.
The show. She said, "Are you an Egyptian superhero?" And Layla just said, "Yes." And went on about her business.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, I am.
Yeah, that was a great line. I thought that was great.
Well,
Yeah.
is there anything else anybody wants to talk about Layla while we're kind of discussing?
Yeah, I mean, I have always been a fan of badass women characters. And part of it is because I also like underdogs, and typically, both in life and in fiction, women characters tend to be underestimated. So when they come in and put the boot to the ass, it's all that much more gratifying, right? Because it's like, I didn't expect the boot to my ass to come from you. It's ha 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 ha, right? And she did such a great job of that, because she also wasn't at any point any kind of a wilting flower. It wasn't that, like, she was the scared, quiet woman who just suddenly comes into her own when it has to happen. She's a badass from step one. I mean, she's not taking any of Steven's shit, but she's also not completely hard. You know what I mean? She's also like, it takes her a little while, because obviously to find out that the person you're married to is, even though it's his body, that's not him you're talking to. She's also empathetic and understanding, and comes around, to accepting Stephen, and actually being more fond of Stephen than she is of Mark. I think they did such a good job making her a whole, full character, giving her a lot of depth and a lot of nuance, that she wasn't just, the muscle that kicks down the door and kicks butt when she needs to, but she also wasn't the soft, gentle caretaker that was there to, help the poor wounded puppy of Stephen when he needed it. I mean, she was rounded. She was.
Yeah, if anything, she kind of had that integration that we were shooting for with Stephen and Mark, because she could kick butt and also have the knowledge part of what was going on, to be able to read what she needed to be able to read, to understand what might need to be done here. And I appreciate that she wasn't nice. In a show that didn't give us a lot of women, I hate to see that we have one and we make her just a pushover. We make her super sweet and super nice. And what place in the story was there for a sweet little mouse of a woman? No place. So I'm glad they didn't try to give her that aspect at all. And wasn't her necklace thing cool? I want one.
Oh,
so if anybody wants to get me a good birthday present.
Well, it was cool too, picking up on what you were talking about, Samantha, when they were trying to put together the star map, and it looked hopeless. And she just said, "We need Stephen." And Mark was very resistant, but she was like the hand in his back going, "Go get Stephen. We need Stephen." And I liked too that when she found out that he had not killed her father, but had been there when her father had been killed and had been unable to save him. The cliche is they break up and she walks away. And they didn't opt for that. I mean, she came to terms. I would doubt she's fully come to terms with it if we see them again, but she came to terms with it enough to put it aside for now and to still support him, which I liked.
Right. I'm not fine. I don't like what you did, but right now we have to feed a giant alligator, and we'll deal with this emotional baggage first. I have an understanding of context.
Well, one of the things I thought was really well done there was, you can see that there's been a lot of conflict there with her showing up and like, divorce? What do you want? Let's, almost that sense of relief when she's like, wait, you're not divorcing me because of me. This is something where you think you're protecting me. I don't need to be protected. But that sense of relief of, oh, you're not, well, you are crazy, but you're not just crazy. There's a reason for it. And seeing that sense of relief of and understanding of, well, not only do you have this almost possession in you, I'm fine with the possessed party, you bring out the suit, but also that sense of, wait, there's multiple use tucked in there. Now I understand, and that sense of recognition. I don't have to like it, but now I understand. And that, I think that was one of those things that was done very well, that you could see in her face was this, I do not get paid enough for this, but
Yeah, it was like she understood there was reasons behind it.
right.
Because I
So I'm
mean,
wondering when we get there in the story with our third version, with is it Jake? Is the
Yeah,
third guy Jake?
Jake Lockley.
Yeah, I'm wondering if Layla will have met Jake. Like, because I think before there was this whole reveal of Mark's other part of being Stephen, she'd probably seen something that she didn't really understand what was going on. Like, if you've ever been friends with somebody with schizophrenia or something, but often before anybody quite knows what happened, there've been some odd things you've observed. And so you knew something was happening. You didn't quite understand. So I'm wondering if she's actually going to have met Jake and not known that that's who she was talking to. I would like that.
That'd be interesting. Well, we have talked around, but not really about the villain who's the hero of his own story. What did you all think about Harrow? Samantha, you want to start us?
Sure. First, wow, Ethan Hawke, huh? I was so startled when I saw him, and I was like, wait, no, Ethan Hawke? All right.
He's still around? Yeah.
Well, and this is not the kind of thing he usually does. So I was very surprised to see him there. But he did a really neat job, and they did such a good job with the zealotry aspect, and him, setting himself up as a cult leader. He got all the right creepy vibes for that. The thing with the glass in his shoes that we never really went back to, but I thought about every time I saw him move. Did you guys think about the glass in his shoes all the time? I was
yes.
like, ah.
Mhm.
And
then when he walked on sand, and it was just like, oh, that's just gonna make it worse.
yeah.
Well, but think about that too. The nature of the fact that you've got one walking on glass, the other is walking on sand. They're both the same element. It's a question of how much has been sharpened. And I think seeing the sand around the bed versus I've got to force myself through the pain, I thought was an interesting contrast between them as well.
Oh yeah. But I definitely thought it was a well done villain. And as we go through and we get more of the history and find out that he used to be an avatar, and then that gave me so many questions, like, how does one stop being the avatar and still be alive out there? And so many questions. But then I was already not trustful of Khonshu because of the other stuff I'd seen in the story by then, and it gave you some empathy for him, because you're thinking, well, maybe he was probably already a little broken in the first place, because Khonshu goes for that, and then being inhabited did not help.
Yeah, I liked Harrow because we all know that a good villain is a little bit sympathetic.
Mhm.
If you got somebody who is 100% evil, then that doesn't, I think they kind of turn into something other than a character. Jason Voorhees, that's not really a character. That's like a hazard. Zombies, but Harrow, like he has a point. Like you may not agree with what he's saying, but you can understand. And it was basically the same point. Did you guys watch Peacemaker? The TV series?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, spoiler alert. There are aliens in Peacemaker, and they want to save us from ourselves. They see our planet going down the same road theirs went down, and they want to take over key people and avert disaster. And clearly we're not able to make the right decisions ourselves, so they're going to do it for us. And that's basically what Harrow is doing. He's like, well, we can't take the chance that these people are going to improve their lives and not do horrible stuff in the future. So, Amit and I are going to take care of them now. And so, yeah, you can say, okay, he is preventing somebody from doing so horrible stuff in the future. But if you take away free will, then it's not really a life to have.
Right.
Then you just become someone's subject.
Right. Yeah, it definitely it had hints from Killmonger, that it was like the MCU learned from Black Panther, that Killmonger, throughout the whole thing, you're like, yeah, he's right, but the way you're going about it is a bad plan. I mean, at the center point, you're right. I can't argue with the specifics you're making, but yeah, and it's. I thought they did a really good. I mean, Ethan Hawke just did a fantastic job. I mean, like Samantha said, the creepy vibes he hit, but the way he really was the hero in his own mind, that it was, he had a strong moral compass. His wasn't set to actual north, but he had one. He stuck to it. I mean, the idea that he really did want to help communities and setting up the communes so that people had food and had places to sleep and all that. And it was, but it was the idea of the absolutes is, well, we've already judged that you're going to do something horrible in your life, so we've got to take you out now. But unlike some other villains, he, up until the end, he had the conviction of his characters, right? I mean, he was ready to, I mean, he stood right up and he said, I can't be your avatar because I'm broken and I'm unbalanced. And I need to die too. So don't pick me, pick somebody else who is balanced, that fits into this. And I kind of wish the character would have pushed back more when Amit wanted to take him and said, no, I'm going to take you anyway because you're so loyal and all this. To me, that would have been a good break from him and his character, that if they wanted to go down some kind of a redemption arc, that could have been him saying, hey, wait a second, everything I said I believed in, everything I support, and everything I'm doing, the being who I'm doing this for just basically came out and said, yeah, that doesn't actually matter when it's convenient or helpful. I wanted somebody to call that out. And I'm disappointed that they didn't, and that he just kind of, he was like, oh, no, don't do it. And then it's like, no, I want you. Oh, okay. Well, if you really want it, well, then I'll go do it. And to me, it was kind of like you were building all this up and then you just dropped it there at the 10-yard line.
This was an unusual show for me, and that when I got to the last episode, there was a lot in it that really satisfied me, but I felt like it actually needed one more. And sometimes I feel like it's the other way around, that there's like 4 more episodes than was actually needed to tell this story. But this one, I think, actually needed at least one more to finish all of those. And maybe they could have landed that arc better if they'd had just a little bit more space to tell the story in.
Yeah, and I don't think they would have even needed to go full redemption arc on him, but just, you've built this character up so long that this is what he believes and what he stands for, and he's sticking to it through thick and thin. Just to have him wilt at the end, there really needed to be something there. It's we're all writers of one flavor or another, that we can all appreciate that you spoiled a really great character that you could have done a lot more with there.
Yeah, and that was one of those hits for me as well. I mean, because I'm at that sense of absolute right and wrong. This is almost that proof that we're just playing a cosmic game with you. It was you're useful for now until I throw you away. And I think that reinforced it. But I think part of the fact that Ethan Hawke played, it's kind of hard to call him a villain. It's kind of hard to call him an antagonist, because again, shown from a particular perspective, one could have argued him as that hero. You understood the motivations, you understood the goals, and he carried the gravitas of those beliefs walking throughout. And I think if he had not been so strong in that role, we would have had a lot bigger problems with Stephen and Mark and what they had to do. Because, when you look at, in essence, walking up and saying, I'm going to judge you on behalf of a deity, and you're found wanting, sorry about that, but you said okay, that idea versus the just absolute bloodshed. But I agree. I mean, I think that was a missed opportunity for Harrow to come and say, wait, I believe in this level of judgment. I've done evil things in your name. And I think that a couple of lines there could have balanced that out in a very different way and given either validity or have taken something there for him to at least question that motivation and be at that point of redemption. But then if we'd had redemption, the only way to have gotten redemption, then we wouldn't have had the last scene.
Yeah.
Well, if we're picking nits, can I
Never. This is comics. We would never do that.
the bit where they have the god meet and Mark is there and when Harrow shows up to talk to the avatars inside the pyramid.
Oh yeah.
Mark is like, with Khonshu is saying, hey, this guy's trying to resurrect Amit. And Harrow goes, nuh-uh. And all the gods are like, oh yeah, okay, you're fine. You're good. You're doing nothing wrong. And I was like, now, hang on. This guy has the scarab that points to Amit's tomb, and his people are over in the desert digging up the tomb right now. You can go and look. And he's got Amit's tattoo on he's standing right there. That whole scene just about tore me out of the series.
Yeah.
And what
I think it was the pettiness of the squabbling within the gods. I think that's,
Yeah.
That was supposed to stop them from looking bigger, but they hadn't done enough with the petty squabbling in the area up to that to get me to buy it in that moment either.
Yeah.
It was kind of the boy who cried wolf, but he had not cried wolf enough. I mean, I think here was what I thought they were leading up to, and I forget which avatar he was, but the guy in a suit, and you see him and Ethan Hawke having that conversation back and forth. I thought he was going to wind up being on the inside of bringing back Amet.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden that was blown. And that was one of those things I kept waiting for. I was like, wait a minute, you just killed him. I thought that was going to be your end. And that was part of what set that up to happen. And that to me was another one of those, did I miss something, or did they start to set something up and put another direction?
Yeah, I think the way I agree with you. That scene just annoyed the hell out of me. It's like, you guys are supposed to be gods, and nobody just thinks, hey, we're going to take a beat and somebody go look. Just make sure nobody's around Amit with some shovels. But the way I kind of dismissed that in my head so that I could move on was, okay, they're showing us that, like I think it was Jim said earlier, they're not actually gods. Or no, it was Dan said, they're not deities the way we think of them. They're extra planar beings, or whatever you want to call them. So they're not, omniscient, omnipowerful, or anything like that. So we're playing into that. And also, like Samantha said, they got the petty, they're more interested in their petty politics than they are in like actually achieving something. And I think that they could have played more into the fact of, that Khonshu, that it was like, oh, Khonshu, you rascal, we know you're always trying to do this. You're always stirring up trouble, so we know we're not going to believe you because you're always making stuff up or making excuses or whatever. But I don't think they did a good enough job explaining that. But that's kind of what I clung to so that I could move on with the story and let that nit be.
And I'm willing to put up with something like that if it gets me to the Taweret avatar Layla.
Yeah.
Who just kicked all of the ass. So
Every
hard.
bit of it. Every bit of it.
Beautiful.
Well, what did you all think about the asylum scenes?
It was tough for me to follow along sometimes, because I knew they weren't real, but I was trying to decipher the symbology behind everything. It wasn't until after the fact that I read an article or somewhere about some of the other Easter eggs that were in there that, like, what was her name? Diane from the museum that was really mean to him. She was one of the nurses, as was the security guard. And like a lot of the characters repeated themselves. And there was like a lot of really subtlety stuff in there that, I'm a simple man. I'm just a poor country lawyer. I miss a lot of that stuff on the first pass. And I think I was so focused on the big picture that I wasn't noticing all the small stuff. But I I'm still not entirely sure if it was all just the afterlife or if it was in the subconscious. And, you know, there were some things that it seems like should have been called out, that somebody should have questioned along the way that nobody did. But I thought it was an interesting play and a neat twist, and it was worth it to get to Twaret, in my opinion. That I would have walked through, you know, a trail twice that long to get to her. So
I had mixed feelings about it. When we got in there, I was like, I don't know. That, you know, the setting is maybe not what I would have picked for our afterlife exploration of philosophies and deciding what was actually the moral side. But they made good use of it. And I think they may have gone that route because of the dissociative personalities kinds of things. And they were trying to handle that with some sensitivity and kindness and empathy, and maybe using that more clinical environment, let them play with like kind of like Hamlet's madness, like, you know, can he tell, you know, is he sane when the wind is north by northwest, or is it he can't tell a hawk from a handsaw? And the that setting kind of pushed us into considering, you know, again, what's real, what's just in his mind, or what's in the other him's mind, and, you know, if any of the other things were real at all. So I did think it was longer than I wanted it to be for what they used it for. I have limited patience for kind of chaos in the storytelling that seems like it falls in love with its own chaos, that it's all just about showing me something that's weird and disturbing, but they don't gain anything in the story by disturbing me or weirding me out. They're doing it just for the visual effect.
Amen.
And so this one went on a little long for me in that regard.
Yeah, seconded.
Yeah.
And I mean, I kind of got the impression that like he was in this, you know, waiting room of the afterlife, the foyer, and it was influenced by his own perceptions. You know, he was aware that he was having some mental difficulties, and so, you know, the like what he saw might have been to one extent or another influenced by maybe some subconscious doubts.
Or maybe Mark has had a stint in an institution at one point or another.
He did
know?
in the comics. I read that.
Mhm.
yeah,
Right. We don't
Well-
know if the guy in the show has or not, but
Well, and I think that was a lot of what you saw there was really fan service and Easter eggs from the comics. I
Yeah.
mean, because there's a lot of elements I think got pulled in because it was meant to be there, because somebody, it's kind of one of those things that the hardcore comics fans who've read every episode or read every issue and all the rest of this would go and say, oh, okay, well, I know what that's coming from, that were there for that purpose, but didn't necessarily help the story we got.
And the bit with him in Harrow's office, Dr. Harrow talking to him there, I thought that did go on longer than it needed to.
Yeah.
And like it gave me really powerful, oh, it was all just a dream vibes, you know, which would have been enough to make me rage quit.
yeah, and
if they actually pulled that.
and I think it wasn't it was misleading, but it wasn't a clever mislead or distraction, that it made you wonder what if Harrow had any kind of hand in what was happening, you know, because he was the doctor, he was the authority figure, that you would have thought that if it was some kind of an afterlife where it was all about reconciliation, that's the wrong person to choose. If your goal is to heal somebody and have them reconcile and come to terms with their past, you're not going to choose the person who shot them as the one that they're going to follow along and accept. You know, I mean, maybe it was the idea that we had a limited number of cast members, you know, in Mark's psyche that we could recycle for different roles, but the fact that he was that character, that had me questioning. It's like, okay, is Amit playing a hand here? Is Harrow playing a hand here? You know, what's the influences? Because otherwise it just didn't make sense to have them as that doctor. You know, maybe it would have worked better if he was like another patient who was trying to tell him, you know, this is all a big conspiracy, this isn't really real, or something like that. but yeah, I think it went on too long. I really would have liked it to get more towards the break that happened, with Mark when he was a kid, that could have hurried along more, that they could have leveraged the doctor and the psychologist in the asylum more to say, we're not getting to the point of why we're here. We're not addressing the actual problem, and just kind of force Mark, use that as a plow to force Mark along, to say, it's time for you to recognize and accept what really happened.
And I think that was one of my things as well, as I kept waiting for this. It turn out to be that Ahmet or somebody was helping to influence what was happening in that experience.
Yeah.
And that was one of my challenges for that whole, for that surrealist piece, was at what point in this do we get to see, is there a hidden hand at work here? No, really, it's just, or at least that's the way it was perceived, is that there really wasn't that hidden hand that they seem to be hinting towards.
It was just Mark's broken mind and interpreting it in a way that he would understand, which still didn't make sense. But that said, once they got to the break, the way all of that was handled, I thought was masterful. They did such a good job portraying, the actress who played the mother. Oh my God, what a hard role that would have had to be, to be able to pull that off with the sincerity that she had, and still, but not be, again, a caricature, right? The little kids who played young Mark and his brother, it was all, I remember seeing when that episode came out, lots of my friends started saying, hey, trigger warning for everybody, if you've got trauma or abuse issues for this episode of Moon Knight, it's a great episode, but be warned going in, prepare yourself. It was done so well. It could have been done so wrong, and they handled it with the care and the respect that they needed to.
Was there anything else that anybody wants to talk about before we wrap up? No? Okay.
I just want to say one thing, and this was something I saw another person, Summer, had pointed out when I was online somewhere, but that whole Laters Gators thing is just never gonna sit the same with me again. Once you make it all the way through the series, if I rewatch it, that's when Steven is saying that in the early episodes, it's just going to be like
I don't know. I'm going to be really curious to see, because the connection from the Eternals, at the end of the Eternals and that splash where you see Mark coming running in, where is he at in the story and compared to that in the Eternals? That's kind of the one hanging thing left for me.
Yeah.
One thing I will say, and it's not really, representation in the Marvel universe has been kind of problematic here. Every so often you get something where, like, Wanda Maximoff, who is canonically Jewish in the comics, that just gets kind of glossed over. And I'm Gentile as you can get. So, it's not really for me to have a lot to say about it, but a friend of mine who is deeply into comics, Abe, if you're watching this, I know that this is something incredibly important, that Mark Spector is super, super overtly Jewish in this. And I loved seeing it. And that's not like a feature of the story. It's just part of who he is. And it was great. I think it was well done. From my perspective. Anyway.
I'm more Jewish than you, and I thought it was well done.
Okay, good. It's not hard to be more Jewish than I am.
I'm happy.
Anyway, just wanted to point that out.
Yeah, well, an overall representation, right? It was that aside from Black Panther, I think Moon Knight had the fewest number of white faces overall as an overall cast than just about any other Marvel product so far. Obviously, when you were in London, there was a lot of pasty faces because you're in London. But as soon as they got away from that, it was, Layla's character, obviously, one of the main characters right up there. but and they didn't do any kind of whitewashing with the avatars for the Egyptian gods. That I was full on expecting that, but
there's Shang-Chi.
right, yeah,
Which
that's
is,
right, yeah.
which I would love to see Shang-Chi and Layla team up.
Oh man, yeah.
Well, if that's it, then we'll wrap. Why don't we go around and each of you can tell everybody who's watching where they can find information about your work, and if there's something upcoming that you want to mention, please do that. Bishop, will you start?
Sure. Bishop O'Connell, you can find me. I have a blog at aquietpint.com, all one word. And there you can find links for my books. Two Gun Witch will be released by the time this goes live. It comes out May 31st. Go pick it up, buy a copy for all your friends. The pre-sale we did, it completely sold out, so that's a good sign. It's 20 people can't be wrong, 25 people, however many it was. And you can find links to all my other social medias on Quiet Pint.
Okay. Dan?
You can find me at danjolley.com. And as you can see in the graphics up here, that's an E before the Y in Jolley. If you go there, you can sign up for my newsletter, which will get you a free novella about a silver alloy robot built by Nikola Tesla to fight werewolves. And my latest book came out last year. This is my first ever fantasy novel. It's a fantasy detective novel hybrid. Not by the time this goes live, but later this year, the sequel will be ready to go. That's it.
Samantha?
Hi, I'm Samantha Bryant. I write the Menopausal Superhero series. It's currently consists of 4 novels, 2 novellas, and a collection of shorts. And I'd love for you to read all of them, please. You can find me at samanthabryant.com, and my social media and links to my horror work can also be found there.
Jim?
You can find me at jamespnettles.com, authoressentials.net. You can find me at the speculative-fiction-academy.com, and of course here at ConTinual.
And you can find me at nancynorthcott.com, and I spend far more time than is probably good for me on Twitter, where I'm also at Nancy Northcott. I do have a Facebook author page, but I tend to forget that I do, so really probably not worth your time to go there. I write historical fantasy for Falstaff Books, and I'll have the concluding volume of a trilogy out later this year, and it's called The King's Champion. And I would like to thank everybody on the panel for participating today. Thanks to everybody who's watching. And thanks also to our sponsors, Heroes Aren't Hard to Find and Heroes Convention. For more information about them, you can visit www.heroesonline.com.